can you give someone your your weekly thing or daily? I know you get up pretty early. I guess it depends what has to be done. These guys are. I need a break when I race, like a Sunday. I probably wouldn't do too much. These guys, because they run every Friday and Saturday, they'll spend a Sunday and get everything cleaned up and get a good start on the car probably.
Yeah, I mean, we might be a little extremist or something, but like I'll start usually 6:30 work, and then we work on every night. But like if we race Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we like to wash, get everything cleaned up, and at the very latest run the valves Monday night after when you get home from work. And the best thing to do is check the ring and pinion if something's wrong with that, and cut the oil filter. And if you can get the valves run Monday, the service in the car is easy. That's usually done by Tuesday then, and then you can get your tires done Wednesday. And Thursday at night before, if we race Friday, the most I'd like to do is check ride heights and go over the tires, and then maybe nut and bolt the car. But
So this is every week in and out?
Is it a full week?
it's every week.
We take the driveline out of our car every week. We repack the nose bearing every week. You know what I mean? But we never have a failure. It costs me less money. You know what I mean? Everything that you can do that you can't fix yourself, anything on your motor, your rear, you have to know as early in the week as you can so you can get somebody else to hook you up. You know what I mean? So that's why we try and do that. Usually they cut the oil filters after they wash the car. We blow all the fuel out of the motor every Sunday. You know what I mean? And all that kind of stuff. But we try and, and I was a little lax, try and look at our shocks every week. And it's not that we have to maintain them, but if the shocks go away, we got to get that repaired. You know what I mean? Checked out. So everything you can do at the beginning of the week makes it easier. You don't got to run around like an idiot at the end of the week.
Cassidy is going to run, well, this year because of the rainy weather, so she runs every weekend whenever Lance, isn't running. So, of course, this past season, because it was rainy, most of the races when she was going to, it ended up raining. Didn't get out that much, but it's supposed to be. It's going to be 15 to 20 races in there, depending on depending on weather on all the open weekends. And actually, before we go to the next guy, Fred, this is funny because you were talking about that everything you do to kind of make the car last longer or save you money. This is kind of putting you on the spot, but I know you wouldn't change anything in your career, but since you kind of, for a lot of your sprint car career, mainly drove for other guys, even whether you had the car at the shop or you didn't have the car at the shop, and now, naturally you have Freddie and you had Stevie, is it, when you're driving for other guys, you obviously have to answer to someone, you can get fired, you're always worrying about that. Do you think, since you experienced both, is it better that way? You don't have to worry about the financial, or now you got to worry about getting the car to the track, where your next dollar's from, can we get this new update to the motor, or this or that? I mean, it's bad either way. You get sick in your stomach worrying about, are you going to have enough money to race, or pleasing the car owner? What would you rather do?
It's probably easier to win more races. Being an owner-operator is a hard thing because you got to measure risk-reward no matter what. Is it worth taking a chance to try and win this race, or am I going to flip out of the place? So that, as an owner-operator, sometimes you've got to sort of roll in, and sometimes you don't think about it. But I would say it's easier to drive for somebody else, obviously, where you don't have to worry about the money. You make more money. But there's also the other side where you got to worry about getting shit canned and all that kind of stuff. But it definitely changes the way you attack the thing. The other thing is for Freddie, and I got to tell him, because he does 99% of the setup, I got to tell him, when you're driving, be the driver, not the mechanic. And he should be out there compensating for what's going on rather than trying to fix the problem in his head. You know what I mean? So that's something we're working on too, you know what I mean? But Donnie's question is definitely, it's hard, because when you get to the races, good group of the guys are letting down because they got home from work, they drug the car to the track, and they've already achieved their goal. As a driver only, your only goal is to win the feature, so you get there, okay, it's time to start work. So it's definitely two different. Donnie, you just about exclusively drove your own stuff.
And that was best for me,
Right.
you know, for my path, it was the best. For you, that's what I'm saying, if you had a do-over, I mean, you still might do it the way you did it because there was a money factor involved. I guess if you could cancel out the money, I don't know if it's better to...
Yeah, because I always worked on my cars even when I
Right.
drove for other people, but the money thing is definitely weighs on you, and it bothers him because we got to worry about coming back every week too, but you still got to go out and just drive. But it's easy to say that as an owner-operator. It's hard to turn that switch off and say, I'm just a driver. Okay, so I don't think I would change, and I don't know. I don't think I could have been as smart as you were. You were more calculated, and you know.
But you got the more wins.
Right. I don't think I'd have lasted as long if I'd have done my own deal though.
You know, it is, you have to, and I don't know.
Yeah, when I say you were more calculated, you were smart enough to, your risk reward thing, you know what I mean?
But especially when I was younger even and started out more, because, and you guys are up against this now too, you want to race so much, you have to worry about getting back to the track, and I was just taught that way from my father, you know, especially if you're only battling for something, you know, 6th through 10th or whatever, the $50 spot isn't worth, you know, trashing the car, because next week you might be running for a win, and
Right.
you know, you can lay it on the line a lot more when you have a good chance to win, where when you're on your own car, you know, and I know a lot of you guys do, that's why I brought it up, that are here, you know, sometimes it's better to push it in the truck and run 10th instead of 9th, because you can save that money rather than working on the car. And when Lance was here at the class before, because he started out owning his own cars, and he made a good point to guys, you know, when you're starting out, you need laps. And if you're on the wrecker, you know, sitting in the pits the second lap of the feature, you're not learning anything, not even just the money aspect of it, you know.
Yeah, and truthfully, as bad as it sounds, you should know the purse before you push off. Because in an outlaw show or an all-star show,
Yeah.
you get from 5th to 10th, there's this much difference for spot, and you got to take this big a chance to get it. And it don't make no sense at some point, you know what I mean? And you're tearing up something that you could win with the next race. So yeah, it's definitely harder to be an owner-operator, but everybody starts out that way.
Right.
Being smart, getting through it is how you get a ride.
Would you rather drive for someone else, you think, or?
I don't know.
Probably
It's,
not.
it's all I've done so far, so I don't.
Right.
But the one thing, like Dad tries to teach me, you want to win every night, but you can't. You're going to be in bad situations where you're only going to run 10th or 6th or something. Just because you want to win that night, you can't overextend and try to risk more than it's going to work, because you're not going to win either way. You might get the 3rd or something. That doesn't mean you lay down, but you got to weigh it out and see. You can't push it. You can couple risks at night, but you can't push too hard.
You can't run 25 laps like that.
Yeah.
No.
Just because you want it don't mean the car's going to stick.
You have though already.
Also flipped out of the place.
All right, we'll go with
I'm
Matt.
good. I'm good.
What's the most important part of a corner to you? Entering, exit.
To me, it's entering. You can't get off if you don't get in.
Yeah.
But if the car doesn't come off, I mean, you can enter good, but it doesn't come off, are you gaining?
That means you probably just overrun the corner then at that point. If you're getting in good, not coming off.
If you can get in good, then you got to start rolling out of the gas and get off good. Because the track's not going to be the same at the end of the night as far as traction wise. If you can't get, the only thing I know for sure, if you don't get in, you ain't getting off at all.
And just watching, like, the reason, and I don't know if it's true or not, but Lance and Donnie, their car has so much drive at the exit, but it's because they're so stuck getting across the corner, they never slow down.
And their
So-
car steers better than every car in Pennsylvania. Their car steers. They could say if there's a moisture strip over there, they can get to it better than anybody. And that all starts on entry. but that's where their advantage is.
And when they're talking about entry, he's not necessarily meaning that they can run in, whether it's them or us. When he's saying entry is everything, 3 car lengths better than the next guy, he's meaning keeping the car under you where it's straight and, you know, you're not having to go in sideways, you know. You gotta be able to go in there with the car stuck, but not rolled up at the same time, or like we talked, it's just gonna spin the tires coming off the corner. Sometimes you can get in like gangbusters if the car is too tight, but it won't come off because it's not sitting down. Paragraph? You have anything? Next? Next?
What's your thought on a 39-inch car versus a 40?
I think, I don't know what you guys think, there's so many guys went in with what I'm going to call a stock. I tell people this all the time, car, whatever brand, it don't matter if it's Maximum, Triple X, or whatever, a 40-inch car. And I know some of them 360 guys like 39-inch cars. I just think a 40-inch car is easier to work with. What do you guys
That's all we
think?
run. That's all we run.
I don't see, I think you can make it work, but I just don't see, there might be some situations where there could be a small gain there, but I just think it seems like it's easier to be in that sweet spot all the time, I think, with just a regular, a 40-inch car. Next?
You don't think it would transfer weight any? We wouldn't see any drastic, say you were wanting to go from 40 to a 39, are you gonna see any drastic
Probably
weight transfer?
Probably your front ride heights would be more than that 1 inch of motor position.
I tell you, we ran 41-inch cars when we went to lightweight motors at one point, and we would scale our car with the 41-inch car, and it only changed 15 pounds, gained 7, lost 7. The length of the drive line would have probably been, you know, because back then, George Gillespie from Pro Shop said anything you're gaining by moving the motor front, you're probably losing because you're getting a longer torque arm with the torque tube.
Exactly.
Everything happens fister on a 39-inch car. You got a shorter spring base, probably. That might get you more drive. I don't think the motor location is as big a deal. But like Donnie said, a 40-inch car is just happy all the time. And if you're not winning, a guy probably has a 40-inch car that's beating you. You know what I mean? Probably most of them.
Should be able to replicate
Yeah.
on a 40.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
Keeping the attitude and making sure you're getting your transfer. You should be able to do it with a 40.
Yeah, again,
Regardless of how slick it gets.
yeah,
I mean,
there's
don't
no
modify
magic, there's no
price
magic. There's enough guys winning on the slickest of slick tracks with a 40-inch car.
Yeah.
You touched on this about corner entry, but when it's really slick, how do you approach driving the car into the corner when it's slick? I mean, with respect to throttle and brake. To each his own.
Just me, just like anybody else. Smooth, not bust the car loose. If you got to move your arms, you got to find out where you know the car needs to be. I think it takes more patience, and again, the confidence thing. It's easy to be confident or patient when you have the confidence you know it's going to spit off. Donnie's shots right now, if somebody chops him or something, he can let him go because he knows he's going to pass him back. You know what I mean?
Right.
And but the whole thing is on a slick track. You got to be smooth and know where to be on the track. That's my opinion. What do you think, Freddie?
Yeah, it's just being smooth as you can, getting in, and, well, the whole way around the racetrack. Sometimes you got to hold the car up getting in if you're down left too hard or something like that, so you don't bust the car loose getting in to the center, but as smooth as you can be. I mean, there's nights like at Grandview we ran good with me driving, and they're like, man, you're flying, and you come in and you're like, you're half throttle is the most you ever go, you know, so.
I think being smooth, you know, smooth off the throttle, you know, too, and, you know, not just quick off, smooth off,
Keep the
smooth
weight-
on,
Keep the
and,
weight in the car as best you can without abrupt transfer.
yeah, and one thing, when I started driving, because you get on these big tracks like Williams Grove, and you're new to sprint cars, and actually I know Fred always used to do this, is what I like, I'd maybe, whether you're following a guy or you're by yourself, guys have a tendency to run down the straightaway and want to try and, especially when the tracks run in there as hard as they can, then they're off the throttle, they're on the brake, and the car's picking up.
Right.
If you lift a little bit early, and if you can get, now if it's slick, you can't hammer down back on the gas, but you can get back on the throttle a little bit, it keeps the car loaded, and kind of like, if any of you saw that race when Freddie went right around gravel, I mean, the car just sticks and you just go, you can gain so much more speed by lifting a little earlier and just kind of keeping the car loaded. A lot of guys do that with brakes too. And you know, when I said earlier about not using brakes, obviously you need them in traffic all the time, you know, and they're a huge advantage when, you know, if your car's, you know, way too tight or something, you can ride the brake and the gas, and you know, I could just, if I was running by myself, normally make better lap times, you know, without trying to work 2 feet.
Yes.
I try and tell him, and when I race at Lincoln, I try and fool the car. I get it turned and get the right rear back hooked up before I even get to the corner. So then you can control with the pedal how close you are to the infield fence. So you sort of hook the right rear back up, and you're just fooling the car and turning it before the corner, if that makes any sense, and go around, then you just roll out of the gas. The further you go around, then you start rolling back on the gas.
But
It almost feels
not
like you're stuck
necessarily
on your
trail braking it into the corner, or
Truthfully, I never concentrated on what I was doing, just what was happening. You know what I mean? I can't say that I was doing this.
Yeah.
I go through a lot of brake parts. I mean, a stock of brake rotors, because I run just regular old cast iron brakes, and that's what I had the most success with. But I don't know what I do.
We asked Donnie the same question when he was at our house one time. He said the same thing. He couldn't tell you what he does, you know,
You're just doing
brake
it.
position.
You know what I mean? But I do know for a fact, that just like Donnie was saying, you get the car turning and get the right rear hooked back up. Most guys drive past where you are and then snap the car loose and then bust it loose. Well, then they're just a victim. You know what I mean? I get the gas and then just roll out of the gas for whatever I feel the car will take or what I did.
It's like you're making a longer straightaway at that point. You know, the quicker you can get back on the throttle.
And you don't have to lift, you know, it all is how good the track is and track speed. You don't have to lift all the way out of the throttle. You know, sometimes you only come half out and getting that, but that little bit kind of like he's saying, lets the car get set and you get back in it when the other guys are out of it.
So what do you say, you turn the car before you get to the middle of the corner? If you're coming in, you turn the car and get it to slide and then hook and go, or?
Like at Lincoln, I would just open the corner up and start to roll out of the gas. And once I knew I had it heading the direction I wanted, I just get back after the gas and get you don't have to hook the tire back up if it never starts spinning. You know what I mean?
Right.
Then you control everything. It's just about patience, as far as I can tell.
Yes, your car seems to sound different than other cars. What is it that's different about the 69K than other cars?
Yeah, Donnie.
Yeah.
I think we need Davey for this. He, you know, however he builds the motors, it was always just a good match for me because we don't run as much gear as the other guys do, even when the track's good, but the motor will still pull. You know, we don't make the big number on a dyno. You know, I'm sure if we dyno back to back, our engines are at least 50 horsepower off theirs, you know, maybe more. And it hurts us sometimes if the track's like low 16 seconds or something where you really need everything you got. You'll see we won't time that good on them nights. But I always liked, when I started racing, my father did what Fred did. He put more gear in when the tracks got slick. And I didn't like it. I take gear out when I got slick. I could just control the throttle better. Now here's where you need your brakes a lot of times though, because when you don't have a lot of gear in, it's like, you know, a street car or something, which I know there's not many manuals anymore, but, you know, you're going into a corner in fourth gear, it's really rolling in, so now you might need good brakes to get the thing wound down a little bit, where them guys that have the more gear in, they can try and run in maybe past you and lift off the gas, and theirs will slow down like you're in first or second gear, you know, but I just always like to take gear out, and Davey just kind of built, that's how he was already building motors, you know, when we kind of got hooked up. So it was a good match, and, you know, not turning your motors, a lot of RPMs kills the motors. You know, you can get a lot more life longevity out of a motor if you're turning it, you know, 8,000 or 7,800 and someone else is turning it, just say even 85. You know, everything's going to last longer on your engine. So it just works, you know, works for us. When Davey quits or something happened, you know, we're going to have to learn all over again, because we'll have motors like everyone else has them. You know, I'm sure we're going to be out to lunch for a while, you know, getting all that sorted out.
I have a question for Freddie too. When you won the National Open right before you retired, it looked like you were intentionally driving the car so that the left front was coming off the ground when you came under the bridge.
Now, there's
Is that just air?
it's just, there's a bump going across at the grove. Like, we run right rear weight, so we carry the right front. And how you come off the corner, if you slip the wheels, the car honkers left too hard, and then it carries the right front. But there's a bump there at the grove. But how you exit the corner is how high the right front
So
gets
you
up.
don't try to set your car up with the left front just sort of bouncing?
Nah, not really. Nah, it's just the way it works out. You know, that's our program.
Thank you. Thank you, Donnie.
Yeah, the car was pretty good that night.
Yeah,
You had a nice
yeah.
car that night. There was no one in your league.
Only took 28
I thought it was
years.
a tough.
I think it rained that night.
Yeah, it did. It was.
Yeah, it wasn't-
It was
really-
one of them bastard tracks.
Yeah,
though, because
it was
it's
a tweener.
In between, yeah.
Yeah,
That's where we struggle. We can be real good at 17 seconds
and 19.
and 19, which is about your program.
Yeah.
But in between there's a spot at
Right.
Williams Grove where the track does something that we can't come up with a program for, and you just sort of got to pick your way through it. You know what I mean?
Why did the Outlaws have trouble at Williams Grove? They look like they do.
Well, obviously Donnie Schatz doesn't,
But
but
he doesn't
Yeah.
have trouble.
no, but it's such a unique track. You know, and it's like you could be the baddest ass in Pennsylvania. You toe to Ohio, you're going to get your ass handed to you. We have unique tracks in Pennsylvania, and I don't consider Lincoln one, but everybody hates Lincoln. But I think that's a normal track compared to Williams Grove. Wouldn't you say? You know, but like Port Royal's an easy track to run at for driving wise, and easier than Williams Grove. Williams Grove, and it's probably more setup than anything, because if you get your car where it's comfortable down the straightaways, you're going to be junking the corners. You know what I mean? That's why I think they struggle.
Next.
Talking about your, at the shop setup lights and stuff, is that with the driver, or I'm by myself, I can't get in the car and measure?
No, we measure without the driver, and then you're going to have to find out whether it's too low or too high. But all you're looking for is a constant spot, the one thing that's always the same. And like I said, there's outlaw guys that never put a tape measure to their car and are ultra successful, but for us, that's what we have to do. I don't know what Donnie does.
It's easier if you have a problem, then you have your reference point, you know, obviously.
Yeah, we do it the same way. We do it without the driver. It makes, someone asks that every year, and it's a great question, and I know, you know, probably the right way to do would be to do it, you know, with the driver, but we just always, everything we got, like you said, is reference points for 30 years. It's from without a driver, so we kind of just do it like that, and, you know, should compensate for if you have a smaller or a bigger driver.
But you do the same fuel, the same air, the same stagger. And try, you know, we have a real flat floor at our shop, but always have a constant spot on the floor. Like when I was at Hamilton's, we marked out a spot on the floor that, and that's what we need to do to be consistently decent.
Next. Over on the end? No?
Question?
I kind of want to just go back to the shock travel you're talking about, with the right rear and the left rear and stuff. And
Yeah.
how a bump spring might affect that, if you run bump springs, how you might adjust that.
We don't run them on and one reason we don't look on the left side, because most of the tracks we run, they would be bottomed out, and the left rear, we're always running, some type of a bump rubber. So, and the left front's usually bottomed out, so we just look at the right side. We haven't messed yet, and I know, there's guys doing it with, bump springs now, and, back in the day, some guys would run a bump rubber on the right front. We've done it, a bump rubber on the right front at the track in a crutch. If we were rolling up and we couldn't stop it. We don't generally do it because then we can't look at that right front shock travel reading. So we haven't been running anything on the right side for bump springs. But one thing you do have to watch about that shock travel, some of the tracks, especially take like Grandview, when you're leaving the track and coming, you're going up the hill and you're dropping down in the pits or something. I mean, you can get an inch and a half of shock travel pulling on or pulling off the track, and obviously if the track's real rough, it kind of throws that out. Or if you get up over the cushion or get up over a guy's wheel or something, you gotta use, I guess, a little bit of common sense with that shock travel reading. It's kind of based on, everything just going okay. Does that answer what you want in? Matt?
Just on turns, when do you feel that you have too many turns, or too less turns?
In and out?
Is there? In and out.
I don't know, we've been there yet. But again, Donnie's a different program. We do one thing and they do another way. And we ran a race this year, it's really interesting. We run right rear weight. A friend of mine from Ohio, Rodney Duncan, his boy Cole, we were at Path Valley at the Speed Week show, and we're on right rear weight, and they're on left rear weight, and both cars ended up looking the same, and we ended up running first and second. You know what I mean? But to your answer, we run right rear weight, and I don't know that there is too much in or out, but that's just for us. You know what I mean?
I mean, if you get to a point where you're putting 2 to 3 rounds, is that time to increase bar rate, you think?
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you there. You know what I mean? If it feels good.
We're generally, a turn would be our max,
Right.
and then, we just change the bar at that point, whether it's a turn in or out. But it's funny, I did that before Davey helped me, and then when he started helping, he was kind of the same way, but that's just a different. And Fred, I forgot to hit on that earlier. That's a great example he gave, because, a lot of time when I was talking earlier about the setup thing, and you kind of gotta find what you like, and, old saying, what, there's 100 ways to skin a cat. Most of the time, I can almost guarantee you the top 3 finishers, whether it's at Williams Grove or it's Path Valley or, it's a 305 race somewhere or a micro sprint race, they probably had 3 different setups in, yet they ran top 3.
And the cars could look identical on the track.
Right, and the cars are working good, they look good.
Right.
But it's just, kind of whatever ends up working, working for you.
But all that goes with your shocks and all that stuff, wheel location, all that stuff sort of mixes in there.
Next? Have anything?
Any normal engine detailing you would do for heavy to slick during a night? Other than flipping the switch to retard the...
We don't. I think them guys use that retard switch. We take gear out, but we don't change timing. We don't do anything. Davy's motors are really smooth, and we don't change anything. I mean, back in the day, I used to be the king of that. We used to change headers. We had 3 different sets of headers and everything when the track would get slick, and change stacks. But really, for the last, probably 20, almost 25 years, since early mid-90s, We just don't change anything.
In all honesty, Donnie's in a unique position because his motors are they appear to be easy to drive and still run good. A lot of guys spend more time detuning a motor. If you go to an outlaw show, as soon as time trials are over, them guys are making wholesale changes. Stacks, nozzles, timing. We just went out and chassis dynoed at Tim Engler's, and that retard switch that he thought was day and night was what, 15 horsepower?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And all that being said, we did other things while we were there that we could get 100 out. But just like the car, everything you do, when Donnie, we used to all go to short headers with big collectors, and then it would screw up the bottom of the motor and make it weird there. Everything you do, you take away from somewhere else. It's just hard. It's a different deal. Donnie's, his motors don't run as good, but he runs the wing way flatter, which I feel allows him to get through the air a lot quicker. You know, otherwise I think but we couldn't just flatten our wing out and do that. You know what I mean? Because our setup wasn't like that. But the motor thing is something, that's a whole nother can of worms, and it's also just as much work as everything else. There's not one magic bullet that fixes that whole deal.
Next.
Shocks. You got the twin tube, you got the mono tube, that whole can of worms. Is there driver feel different between the mono tube versus twin tube and a performance difference? Are you playing around with gas pressures in your shocks and things like that?
You know, personally, we've been really good on gas shocks for a long time, and we've also struggled at the same time, but we were always able to get back to where we went good on them. But I think the gas shocks mask what's going on with the car a little bit more. You get less low, you know, you got more low speed control in a gas shock, and you don't feel what's going on inside the car as much.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It probably, if you were just starting out, might be easier just to run gas or regular shocks to learn. And I don't know there's an advantage with gas shocks other than you can get really consistent valving. You know what I mean? I think that'd be.
Yeah, I think he's right on the. I think he's right on the money there. I've been back and forth different times in my career to gas and non-gas, and I was never any good when the track was wet. But the gas shocks give you so much control. You know, it really makes the car feel like a Cadillac. You know, when the track's wet and heavy. I always thought, but I probably just was never tuning them right. To me, it was always harder to hook up with a gas shock, you know, on a smooth, slick track, let's just say, because they kind of give you so much ride control. But the main thing is what he hit on 100%, is it they mask what the car's doing, and it was harder. Now keep in mind, there's probably, I don't know if there's, well, anymore, because I don't know what all them guys do. There's probably more guys winning with gas shocks than non-gas, huh? Outside of shots, all them other guys run gas shocks, right?
Yeah.
So there probably is more guys winning on gas shocks than non-gas, but I just think the driver feedback is better on the non-gas because you can feel the car so much more.
Okay.
But, you know, it's something, and not that it's cheap, but it's another one of them things a guy probably needs to see what's, you know, better for him.
Right. Okay.
Next.
Yeah, I got one for Freddie. Pete, going to a car like with a wing slider, do you move that much on every straightaway behind somebody, or you just kind of?
Yeah, that's the only time you move it down the straightaway. And with our setup, you turn the wheel back and forth very little bit to get more pressure up to get the wing.
Right.
And after a couple times, you could practice maybe warm-ups or whatever, but you get the feel of it, and you know how much timing a couple inches would be on the wing valve.
You move it under green, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All the
yeah,
time.
I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we usually have
Yeah.
a tape line up there, you know, so you can look up,
Right.
you know what I mean, and see. It's usually harder to get it to go front if you go too far
Yeah.
than it is to get it back. Going back is easy.
It's comical sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, you know, sometimes to get it front, I used to have to do it in the corners.
Yeah.
And especially if you're in traffic or something, then it moves, you know, too much and it can be a handful sometimes. Next.
On the vacuum chassis, I noticed that Lance runs his wing almost full tilt forward. Is he in the forward post or the second post on the?
We run in the back post, and, you know, Lance, for some reason, and me and Davey can't figure it out, certainly we can't complain about his results, but I would always be one of the first guys, and I know Freddie is when I look at their cars, to have the wing back, you know, especially in the feature when the track got slick. That's just what worked for me. Lance does not like the wing back at all. I don't know how he goes so good when the track's slick. You know, me and Davey both say if you move that wing back, you know, it'd really go on a slick track. We'd have a lot more traction, but he does not like how it drives with the wing back, and, you know, it's big for him if he moves it halfway back. I mean, I hardly ever see it like that. You know, usually it means we missed it and we're way too loose or something, because he just don't like how it drives back, you know, for whatever reason. I mean, it probably does drive harder back, I would say.
You're less in control. I mean, till the end of the straightaway, you can turn the wheel this much and nothing's happening. You know what I mean? Most of the time, you got to roll out of the pedal and put the wheels back down. But that's what it takes.
And also on these wedges for the motor plate, 1, 2, and 3 degree wedges that are tilting the front of that motor up. Is there anything to that? Aren't you getting away from, you know, the motor plate doing its job?
We've never used them or even experimented with them. We probably should, but we just run the whatever standard maximum degree is.
I've tried it, and again, I'm not saying there's nothing there, but I've never been good enough to feel it. I don't know if it's supposed to raise the center of the mass of the motor to get it on the right rear harder, or just change the driveline angle. But, you know, J&J we had, they made a wedge up, and we put it in there, and I can't say that I noticed a difference. I know one time we lowered the motor down below the center of the tubes, and that was no good. But as far as the other thing goes, I couldn't tell the difference, positive or negative.
Okay, thank you.
Next.
Okay, the question is, when he goes out and his warm up and his heat, who makes the final decision what you're gonna change?
Truthfully,
Even though I watch you on the trailer, watch him at
Right.
every turn, every lap. Who makes the final
truthfully, in
decision?
all honesty, I'm afraid to mess him up. So if somebody's going to screw up, I let him do it until it gets to a point that I know that my way is better.
But you don't say nothing? You just let him go?
I'd say 99% of the
That's the way to
time.
do it?
There's a decent amount of time I think I need one thing, and it's the opposite, you know, when you're.
And that's usually if we're too tight.
Right.
You know what I mean? And at the beginning of this year, we weren't very good. We got upside down at the beginning of the year, and we weren't running very good. And he kept saying this. I said, "You're not driving right." You know what I mean? And you can paint it however you want. If you don't enter the corner right, you're not getting off. And finally, it clicked, and he got going good. And we could have changed everything twice, and it would have made a difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he got back. But in all honesty,
So now with Brandon, you let him make the decision still?
to a point, yeah. I mean, I have a friend of ours helps him, and you know what I mean? It's just a different deal. But they run the same thing in the end of the day, the same turns. And Freddie and him talk more than me. I'm afraid to screw him up, so I don't really try to get involved, in all honesty.
It's tough running for a guy that has 420 wins. You know, you can't argue
No,
that.
I didn't have no problem telling Stevie, we're at some place one night, and Stevie said, "I think we need to run a 94. It was probably a little wetter. I said, "Well, if you want to win, you run a 96. Put a 94 on if you want to run somewhere else." And he put the 96 on, we won. But with him, it's like telling somebody to run harder that you're associated with, and then go out and dig themselves up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a road you don't want to travel, so.
Next, behind him. Over. Got anything?
Just a curiosity question, but on your motor maintenance programs, do you have a predetermined amount of laps that you run on your motors before you freshen them up, or do you just run them till they're ragged out and then it goes from there?
Us, we do, we probably run way too many races on our motors. You know, we do what they said they do, you know, cut the oil filter apart all the time. So, you know, monitor if you're getting any pieces in it. If not, because of Davey's age, he just, with racing during the season, he just don't want to rebuild the motors during the year. So, you know, we rebuilt over the winters and we got what we got. So we kind of got to run them more races than I'm going to say what is ideal. Now again, the way he does the motors and with us turning less RPM and stuff, it is easier, you know, it is easier on the motor. But, you know, we're probably, you know, our engine program isn't going to be tuned up as these guys. I'm sure they don't go much over 10 races, I would imagine.
We can go up probably 15, Freddie.
Yeah.
We have a 12-headed motor, we can run 20, 25, you know what I mean? But like Donnie said, if you run more RPM, the only thing that's going to break today is valve train. You know what I mean? Valve springs are your weak link, I would say, and we run about 15. But again, when we were at Tim Angler's, we had one motor that had pretty many shows on it, and I said to Tim, I said, well, this one's got pretty much racing on, but he said that, what did he say, 7 to 12 horsepower is all he sees, because the valve job don't go away anymore because they're all coated valves. So, but it's just, you don't want to go too far and make pieces is the biggest thing, and usually it's a valve train issue. But we're about 15 on most of our motors.
Next. What's that retard switch you guys keep talking about?
MSD, you can have a retard switch. You can run off, you have to have, well, they do make a mag MSD. They put 2 sets of points in it, and you can do that, or you can have a trigger ignition, and then you run off the mag, which you set the timing on that at 31, and then you can retard up to 4 or 5 degrees off the trigger ignition. You know what I mean? So that's what that is. I think what they say is if you go any more than that, it somehow throws the mag out of phase, which I don't understand all that, but I think we're 4 or 5 degrees is all. But.
Next. What do you guys use for your bird cage angles? You set them right at 90 and you set it up on your racing blocks or your
Asking
squaring setup
bird
blocks?
cage time. We sit ours straight up.
Yeah, straight
So
up.
do we. You know, when I drove the Apple car, Eddie was more old school, and they would, you know, you would set it up straight, and if you were at the track and you needed more traction, he would roll the radius rods a turn or two, both sides, and try and load. I don't know. I think that's what we did. Did you do anything like that?
0 on the right rear, 1.5 on the left rear, predominantly.
Is that right? And that's more changes it.
Maybe it's just old school.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
We run ours at 0. You got your ride height blocks, and he sets them up at 0.
We do the same thing. So they're probably like a 6 and a 5 block or something, right? You were asking what blocks we use. Like a 6-inch on the right and a 5 on the left, and I mean most of them. I go by the bubbles. I know you probably shouldn't. Do you guys trust them or not? Or don't you even run stuff that has
We
bubbles?
got the one with the bubble, but it's digital too. So.
Yeah, he means the bubble in the bird cage.
Oh no, yeah, we don't.
We have a digital level that the flat spot underneath there. We just check it there.
Next. Let's see what row am I in. There. You have anything?
You buying wings, you made mention that wing position, and I realize front and back is a lot, but are you left to right? You changing your wings left to right?
We're centered on our cars, except we have some wings that are built off to the right for certain racetracks.
We run ours are centered. Just centered on the car left to right.
But do you have different wings for different racetracks that you go to?
Well, we only have one rule. You know, we basically have one rule now. I mean, we have a thinner wing we use like when the track's fast. You know, if you don't need as much hookup. And basically, the normal wing, I think everyone's probably about the same. You know, they're right to the limit. They have how thick they can be. so everyone's kind of got the same thing, you know, now it's almost to where it's like a tire rule, you know, where everyone runs the same tire, that's kind of how the wings are.
What about sideboard positioning on the wheel?
We run ours, and again, it was something that came from when I was driving the car, and then when Lance got in, because I'd go in the corner and roll out of the throttle so much, the car would want to roll up. So I raised the left side board as much as we could, just to try and get more air there, you know, and help the car turn in the center of the corner better. And we dropped I dropped the right side board, you know, just to kind of make it way bigger, let's just say. And, you know, I started doing it, and I liked it, and then when Lance came to drive the car, we just, you know, we kept it the same way, and we never changed it. I don't know that if we go to like a Knoxville or Eldora or someplace, you know, where you're really going left, that it's the answer. And sometimes when the track's really fast, at Port Royal at the end of the year there, I'd say it probably hurt us in time trials. They were setting track records, you know, because you're already going left enough, and now with our sideboard, we're really, you know, banging left. But otherwise, it's just kind of like Fred said, you know, you get into where you got everything that's meshing together, and you get to the pure afraid to change. Next.
On front wheels, is there a big difference between the 8-inch and 9-inch width? And also, I see some guys playing with 5-inch offsets. What are they doing with that?
I always thought, you know, if you're not changing your axle, if you go wider wheels, it makes the car tighter. I thought they were don't turn as good, or what?
I just think, you know, it's sort of like a go-kart deal, where when you run the wider wheels, they get out further. Whatever the kingpin inclination in the spindle is, it just moves the weight around. It might transfer weight a little bit more because of the wheels being out further, is all I see. You know, on a go-kart, they just move them in and out to change, I think anyway, but we run what?
8-inch.
We just run 8-inch. And when I was at Apple and a couple other places, we ran 10 inches, and we're good most of the time with both of them. You know what I mean?
We run a 9 on the right front and a 10 on the left front.
So it doesn't seem to make a difference if you change from an 8 to 9 or 10?
Well, again, when you made that change, it's just kind of our package is where we settled in for the width of our front end. What, you know, I seem to like when I was driving, you know, we just kind of settled in there. I'd say it, to me, at like a Williams Grove or something, it seemed that when I initially went to it, going to a wider wheel on a track with a really long straightaway, and the car might have drove a little better on the straightaway, was the original reason we went to it. I thought it could just be in my head, and then we just kind of stayed with it. And I've never messed with a 5-off right front wheel. I know we've gotten calls for them, so guys must be doing it, but again, we don't change during the night, or so we kind of just, you know, run the same thing all the time, any track we go to.
Is there advantage with the 31-inch radiator on a lot of cars are coming out with 31-inch? The torsion bar, make it longer.
To me, and I can tell you, when we sell them to people that haven't had them, I'm going to say probably half the guys, I mean, we sold them to some people and they're like, it changed their life, you know, like it was huge for them. And then other guys would say they couldn't even tell the difference and went back. For us, again, it was something. When I was driving, we did it, and I liked it. I mean, it kind of,
what did it actually do, though?
It keeps the car like it's freer, not kind of like moving the right rear out, but doesn't seem, for me, it never really made it much looser. But it kind of just has that feel where it rolls the corner a little bit better and smoother, kind of like how we said with a keeping the right rear out, but putting more offset in it, rather than moving the wheel in. It's kind of just like that. It just kind of felt better, like the car just rolled the corner better, and it did seem to hurt us when the track got slick. So when Lance came to drive the car again, he said, you know, let's not change anything, and we had it in there, and so he's only driven our cars with it in because we just never changed it. We were good right off the bat. All right, as soon as everyone gets seated, we'll get with the guy where we stopped on the questions. We'll run through these questions for these guys, and then we'll get Dave up here. We'll start talking about some brake stuff, and then afterwards, you know, we'll take more questions if you have some after Dave's done too. If there was something you thought of or whatever, and we'll wrap it up. So we'll start with where we left off. Anything now? Do you have anything? No. Excuse me? Oh, we asked.
Because I've already heard that, you can have 33 and 25, and they're all be different on the dyno.
He's asking about dyno and torsion bars. He heard that pick about whatever number you want at 1025. You know, if you're dyno them, that they'll all be different. I'm not a big fan of that. I personally just I like to change them when I can afford to change them. I know these guys are probably different. They probably run theirs as long as they come up okay. Probably when they measure their car out would be my guess, but that's pretty much it.
That's our dyno.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in any of those torsion bar dynos. And I personally think when you twist the bar, the twist back, the rebound's what's important. So I don't know that there's any that can check how quick that is. So, you know, we just run them. My way of thinking, if I was a millionaire, I'd change them every race. I'd put new bars in. You don't necessarily know what you have, but I just feel good with new bars. You know, we kind of can't afford to do that, so maybe 10 races on the front, and I'm going to say 8 on the rears is what we do. So I say whenever you can afford to do it. Now, if you wreck, you know, flip or something where you go up over a guy's wheel or spring a bar, I think you should just change them. You know, I don't think that's good. Do you guys do that? When
Yeah,
you wreck or not?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're not sold on the dyno on the board.
Excuse me?
You're not sold on that.
No. We have one. We paid a lot of money for it. You know, and we test bars for guys that want them tested. I just don't know really how accurate it is. I mean, I don't bother testing the bars for our own car, not because I'm lazy. I just, you know, I don't have that much faith in it. Yes.
What's your thought on the difference between brands of bars or makers of bars?
On brands, you know, mostly I don't think there's that big of a, that big of a deal anymore. You know, chalk sticks are popular. The pack bars that were Schroeder, you know, probably the two most popular ones now. I would say, but I don't really think you can go. I don't think you can go wrong. Yes.
Is there any truth to the idea between the solid bar and the tube bar, that the tubes react faster than the solid bar?
That was always, it's been forever since we've run a solid bar, but when they came out with the hollow bars, that was always the thing, that they reacted quicker. So I think the solid bar is like a little bit lazier, a little bit slower. Okay, where were we? Next row back. Do you have anything? No? Over? Yeah.
How much air do you run in the front tires?
He's asking how much air do you run in the front tires? We run like 11 in ours, and it's not really something that we change during the night.
Like some people say like 14 and some more, right? So that's a lot. No.
I mean, I've already run, but not more than a pound difference, a little, if we had front tires that maybe didn't come up with hardly any stagger,
Right.
but not really for, tuning purposes. And I've hardly ever run more than a pound difference. I don't know. He's
We
got
run
it
10
at 10,
We
12
run
pounds.
10 and 12, but feel that we should run more in the left front of Port Royal.
Okay.
That's our belief.
Next. Here. Do you have a question? No. Here. No.
Only thing Freddie was talking about the pick when you're in the shop. Is that when you're picking up underneath the rear end?
Yeah, into the center of the rear cover.
Piece of angle iron or something on the jack so you can pinpoint or no?
You can. Some guys put a socket on there, but I just go right under the center.
Yeah.
Oh, without anything on it?
No.
Just right from the jack, right on.
Right on one of them bolts, like for the rear cover, you know how?
Where it can pivot.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on that high spot on the rear is all.
Okay.
Yeah, back in the day, that's all we did, put a socket on there,
Yeah.
piece of angle iron, whatever,
And it used to fall off all the time.
Yeah.
Why, eh?
What are we doing there?
They're jacking under after they scale the car, jacking under the rear to see which tire, how high, I think on theirs it was like 4 inches, how high the left rear comes up between underneath the tire and the ground. Tell how much regular weight you have. You mean, he's asking, other than vision, we run our right sideboard tapered instead of the corner cut off, that's what you're asking, right? I just did it like that because I thought we couldn't run a full board because we have it lower and you can't see. And the tapered, I thought it gave you a little bit more kind of square inches than having the whole corner cut off. So that's the only reason why we did it.
No, with that on the, you bring it lower, what are your the front posts that be 90?
The top post, that's a good question. He asked the length of the top post, and that is a tuning tool that we use. Naturally, higher makes more downforce, but makes more drag. So shorter, is better. If you want to really fast track. I'm going to say, if you're in the front sockets, which is the normal position, because in the back on most cars, you would need an inch shorter to be at the same height. So in the front, which is going to be the normal position, 10 inches, I'm going to say, is going to be, a normal, I'm going to say probably a lower end. I'm going to say for most guys, an 11 is going to be like in the middle on a race end. 12, if you're on an extremely slick track. 10 if you're on a really fast track and you don't need as much downforce.
Are you talking about standard cage car height?
Yes.
Okay.
The wing post, if you're just in
Yeah.
like the standard socket. Some cars have a front and a back, but if you're in the front, which is like the standard location.
Right, okay. So it'd be shorter with a taller cage car.
Oh, what do you have, like a 2-inch?
I have a brake, so it'd be 2.
I think
two in
the
back
fronts are
and-
the same location.
The front should be the same.
It's 2-inch wedge, but I think
I was
front
just saying, like,
location.
wing height, or the post height,
Yeah,
should
but I
be
think the-
longer or in shorter than,
I think they're the same spot in
They end
the,
up the same spot, it's just
The
2
same
inches
height.
taller at the back.
okay, I got you.
Your rear wing stand would have to be shorter, but not your front one. I don't feel.
yes.
Is there we're talking about rear wing, the height of the wing post. What about the nose wing, height of the front post?
That's a good question, and you know, we never messed with that. I mean, forever, I've run mine. If you stick a tape measure on the top of the torsion tube to about the center of the wing in the front, around 12 inches. That, we've never lowered it, never raised it for track. We put it at 1. Even the pitch in it, you know, we never really change it at the track. We run it, we just put it in a spot and run it there all year.
What about the ramers?
We're 12 1/4, so the same thing. Yeah, we have one hole in the back strap, so you don't mess with it, really.
You just run them at the same angle as the down tube?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, now we touched on the lead that you put into the front axle. And then, I'm not sure how you put the rear axle in the car, but then do you also play with your radius rod so that you get wheelbase gain on the right side and minus on the left, or what do you do there?
Changing
the pickup points on the radius rod.
Changing the angle
Yes.
of you can do that on the right front. You know, we've done it already. I mean, I think there's probably a little something there. He's asking about on the right front, if you raise your radius rods on the frame, you know, you'd have to order a car like that or weld the spuds in yourself. When the frame goes down, it pushes the front axle ahead, you know, it would change your
I mean, you can do the same with the rear radius rods too, do you? Or just kind of put them somewhere and leave them alone?
We put ours in one spot and leave them there.
When you sit the back of the car down, do you come up with the radius rods, or you leave the radius rods where they were? Like on a slick track, you said you might lower the back of the car.
I never change them. I don't think them guys said they ever change. We just run them the same from the tackiest of tracks to the slickest of tracks.
What kind of wheelbase differences do you run then, right side to left?
The 5/16.
That's it?
Like they said, yeah, the lead.
Okay, you just get that with the front axle.
Correct.
That's it.
Thank you.
Next.
Doesn't hear anything?
Yes, on fuel oil, like some heat flow feature, do you change like your ride heights when full features?
He's asking, do we change the height at all for the fuel load, like from the heat to the feature? And I know Davey will, like for time trials or something, because we don't put in more fuel than what we need, you know, to run a few laps. He might take a quarter turn or something out of the back, just so the car's not real high. But for the feature, because it's part of their homework that they do at the shop, which is, you know, what we do too. You kind of try and set your car up in the middle of the fuel load, so that, yeah, when you have a fuel load, it's obviously going to be a little bit lower. And, you know, when you end up at the race without a lot of fuel in, it's going to be higher. So we just set ours up to kind of be in the middle.
Yeah, we're the same. You know, everybody says with fuel load, we run 28-gallon ATL tanks. I don't feel the difference, or never felt the difference that much at the beginning, but they pay at the end of the race, so you wouldn't want to raise the car for the beginning other than to get whatever spots you could. You know what I mean? But yeah, now we don't mess with that. We, like Donnie said, we do what we think are our happy ride heights at the 10 gallons, and then whatever it ends up at the end of the race. But we don't adjust it at the beginning.
Next. to the back. Over there.
Outboard brake, right rear brake caliper outboard. What's the benefit to that?
What I noticed, he's asking what it does to put a right rear brake on. I've tried that a couple times in my career. It's not popular in our area because when you hit the brake with the right rear brake, it wants to bring the ass end around, make you loose when you hit the brake pedal. And a lot of our tracks, when they start getting slick, they get slick on corner entry. So now if you do get on the brakes at all as you're getting in the corner, like the car almost wants to spin out. I have run it already on the left side. If you just need more brake, when we had, you know, before we were on Willwood stuff, we had other stuff that didn't stop very good. Then we added a left rear brake. That just gives you more brake without making that loose feeling. It doesn't seem to, on the left rear, change your car much. It did to a very small extent. If you would ride the brake, especially if you'd run the top like on the cushion and you'd ride the brake, kind of holds the car down on the left rear. I took notice, but it mainly just gives you more brake. But the right rear stuff's popular in the Midwest and in California. They have real small, tacky tracks, so it is popular out there. Is that?
Yeah, I think it rolls the bird cage and pushes the left front down. So like it said in California where it's rough, you hit the brakes, sort of tries to roll the cage and push the left front down and sort of free the car up on entry. I never had no success doing it. The left rear, I think, if your radius rod is pointing down already and you would drag the brake, I'd say it does like Donnie says and rotates the car around. But I think it's from rolling the cage. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. So whatever angle your radius rod is on, it's pushing up.
Then it
It's
would
going to push that car up and dip the left front. If it's the left rear, and somehow you have the rate, but most of the guys at the end of the straightaways got the angles down, I think it would rotate it down. That's the way I think.
So then, what about throttle travel? And how much throttle travel should you have? So I've had guys tell me you should have a lot, and some tell me not as much.
It's
pedal. Like
I don't know.
pedal travel.
It seems like it's hard. I mean, I remember when, you know, back in the day we used to really run a lot. Now, you know, probably I'm going to say somewhere around not more than 3 inches. We probably are 2 3/4 to 3.
That's right where we are. 2 3/4.
It's almost hard to move your foot more than that, don't you?
Yeah.
Don't you
Yeah.
think? Like, I mean, at one time I had 5 inches throttle travel.
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
hard to get your foot in a
30
sprint
years
car
ago.
to roll like that. But I can tell you, Steve Kinzer won a zillion races, and he had 1 inch. You look at his car, he had 1 inch. You know what I mean?
How many Steve Kinders are there?
Yeah, there's not, I wouldn't try and duplicate his accomplishments.
Next.
Do you plan on doing any traveling, either one of you? And it's probably going to do any promotion.
That's about promoting and traveling.
I'm not going to promote a race this year. We're just trying to concentrate more on his racing and see how things go on. We'd like to go to Knoxville for sure. He's just changing jobs and he's getting a little bit more flexibility. But to go to Knoxville, like Donnie alluded to earlier, we'd need to go there 3 or 4 times before the year starts. We might even, and I don't know for sure, I'd like to set a car out there so we could just travel back and forth if it's going to rain out here. And all that being said, you go to Knoxville, from everything I'm told, on a weekly show, it's 20 laps, the curve is halfway up the race, and you might learn a bunch of stuff that won't do you no good at the Nationals anyway. You know what I mean? Maybe how to fuel your motor better, that'd be about it, I think.
Yeah, I don't know what, Lance would like to go to Knoxville, but it's probably not going to happen for the same reason them guys said. You know, you don't want to go out there and, you know, make an ass of yourself, and it's just so hard to go out there. And again, because warm-ups you almost can't tell anything, the track's usually greasy, and then the first thing is time trials, and if you're not accustomed to the track, now in time trials, if you get a bad number, sometimes that'll drop off a second
Right.
there, right? And, you know, some guys can still kind of make up for that, but, you know, if you're not used to it, and in our position, I know Davey probably wouldn't go, so I can turn the wrenches, but if he's been doing them for the last 10, 15 years, now we're going to the biggest race of the year, and all of a sudden, I'm gonna do everything, so then the stuff I was doing, you know, you gotta do that, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to go. We'd like to go.
Them guys are really good out there, and it's a whole different way of racing.
Yeah.
Like in Pennsylvania, that moisture strip on the bottom is good if you can hit it. It's just, they race so much different, and it's not something that guys from around here couldn't get accustomed to. It's just that much different, and they're good at it. And you can watch all the videos and stuff you want. It's just hard to adapt in a weekend at the toughest race of the year. But I definitely got to get him out there, you know what I mean? And you got to take your lumps until you figure it out. But hopefully this year we'll be out there.
This guy's all the way in the back. Do you have anything?
Ride height, where are you measuring ride height from? And just like with the right rear tire, where are you measuring from? Some guys will measure off the arm, some guys will measure off the frame.
We measure our tires, I don't know, started doing this maybe 5, 6 years ago, off the rear arms. So off the inside of the rear arm, so it comes out 2 inches less the measurement than if you measure like up around the shock mount from the frame. Davey started doing it down there because if the tilt or something was changing in the car, you know, it was changing the measurement a little bit, and you didn't change anything, you know, and you know, we'd go to put another tire on or something, and he'd make some adjustments, and then it would change, and we didn't really change. It was just kind of messing us up. So we started going off the arm, and otherwise the frame heights. I mean, I think everyone does it the same, just from the ground to the center of the torsion bar in the front and the back. Is that what you wanted, or?
What's your feelings on the rule changes that they're making for this year?
Yeah, ask this guy. I think he's a proponent of them, right? He wants to know what you think of the rule changes for this year.
Listen, I'm all about protecting my kids and everybody else, but I'd have liked to seen some testing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And other than that, all I'll do is get myself in trouble for talking. You know what I mean? I just, you know, I'm all in favor of being as safe as we can, but they need to make the tracks safer, but we can't put them out of business either. The things that are hurting the guys are the tracks, not the cars, but the cars can be made safer. So anything they can do to make the guys safer, I'm for. I'd have just liked to see some testing, and I personally would have liked to see them implement it over a period of time that, you know, was a little easier for the guys to absorb. You know what I mean? That's my thought.
I agree. I mean, we've talked a million times about, you know, however many cars they got, and they make all the rules, you know, the outlaws, and then guys get all new cars and get all new stuff every year, and you know, it's tougher for you know, the really small teams. You know, guys might have had cars or something, or reusing cars, and you know, so I thought, I was shocked when they made it, you know, for this year, but I guess, you know, if you want to run with them, you don't have too much of a choice. You know, it's like the other rules they have. You can disagree with them, but it's not really going to get you anywhere.
And if you race 410s around here, to have a different car and then change to that, I don't know that it'll make any difference. But at the beginning of the year, you set up to try and win an outlaw race, because that is what you want to do. And you know, you basically can't fight City Hall. You know what I mean? And I don't totally agree with it. I agree with the thought process, but not the execution, I guess.
Anything else? Yeah.
What's your thoughts on having more than one tire manufacturer on the track at the same time?
probably easier this way, to be honest with you. You know, when they, you know, I ran on them deals when there was no tire rule, and it was brutal. I mean, I already heard these guys say, and I know we work 2 to 3 nights a week, and we don't run near as many races as these guys, but we work 2 to 3 nights a week on tires, and you know, I used to run, and you know, Fred ran a little bit back in that time when, you know, Hoosiers were better at one track or at one part of the night, even at Williams Grove, and then, you know, you had McCreary's, they were back then, American Racers were maybe better at a compound or 2, and then Goodyears were better. You had to have all 3 brands of tires and different, you know, compounds and stuff. I mean, it was a lot of wheels, and, you know, a guessing game. I don't think the tire rule did me any favors. You know, it was fun to try and pick the right tire that way, but it's probably better this way. I don't know. What do you?
Yeah, I would
think?
say probably. I don't know that the racing didn't suffer. You know, you take somebody that could run a soft tire and manage it well, could create his own lane running the bottom, versus one compound fits all. You know what I mean? That'd be the only thing I seen. And personally, we all had gotten tire deals and had basically earned them after a bunch of years racing, and that all went away. So, you know, I don't know. The biggest thing is we need to create good racing, and I do believe that 2 compounds probably be more expensive for us all, but I wouldn't mind seeing that. But I sort of like the tires we run. You know, a lot of guys don't. I didn't like the Goodyears, but that could have just been the, you know, the way we were racing at the time. But it's still, the tires are still one of the biggest expenses in racing.
Yeah. And
even over motors, in my opinion.
Yeah, tires are expensive, and you need them, and you know what are you going to do? I will say, and I know I probably differ on this and them guys, but I probably won half the races in my career on used tires, and I think a lot of times in the feature, I mean, you can't put a tire on that's all feathered up or something, but you know, if you got a decent used tire, you know, even if it's wore down, you know, a quarter of the way or something, I don't think most of the time in the feature it really hurts you that much, because in a couple laps everyone's tire's used and, you know, feathered off anyway. You know, there's probably guys spend more on tires, you know, if you're a lower budgeted team. I think there's some money there to be saved, and you know, run used tires a little bit more, and maybe put the money to better use somewhere else. I don't know. I think them Allens, they still run mostly used tires all the time.
They had been for a long
I
time.
think, you know, Bobby Allen cars, and they're running pretty good. And you know, there's sometimes I think a new tire helps. You know, mainly if the track's, you know, wetter, and a good new tire is usually a little bit softer, but most of the time the way the track is in the feature, I personally don't think it matters that much. Yes?
Is it good to like grind them down or anything before then, like before the feature then?
Oh, I think that's good. I don't see no negative to grinding them down. Do you guys?
We do it between each of them.
We do it. We do it all the time.
Yeah.
What about turning them over? What about flipping them and running them the opposite direction?
On your left.
I don't think that's any good. I mean, I used to do it all the time, and probably didn't know that it wasn't good. It's probably not the right thing to do. Get, you know, all them strands and everything start going one way, then you flip it around. I think it's probably better if you don't flip them.
I couldn't hear what Freddie said. You do it because why?
No, I said we just do it between each event. So every time I hit the track, new tire, after it comes in for warm-ups all the time.
Why do you do that? Clean that off with a grinder.
I know when they're new to get the mold release off, but then just to get another edge, and it's the point now we do it just to do it, I think.
And a lot of it is, you know, if the tire, which don't happen all the time, if it starts to seal up, you might be able to get that, whatever it is, off and get it going right away again. You know what I mean? Give yourself another shot. We try and run one tire all night long, with the exception of the outlaw shows, right rear. You know what I mean?
So you grind it, and then after you're done grinding it, then that's when you siphon it to however, like based on those pictures or whatnot, per se.
Yes.
Like for,
Yeah, yeah.
Just showing how to run in my house.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Personal question, you two guys can answer this. Do you guys take more satisfaction out of winning as an owner or as a driver? That's a tough one.
Well, it's probably different, you know, you get some satisfaction, you know, more, I mean, I still do with Lance driving the car naturally, but, you know, naturally more if it's your kid. You know, it's tough though, even though it would be your kid to get as much satisfaction as you get when you were racing yourself. I think it's hard to deny that. It's nice to see your kid running though, and I mean, we're having fun with Lance, even though I never really, knew him before, or hardly ever really talked to him, we're going to the races and having fun, but I don't think anything beats driving the car yourself.
No, for me, I mean, I enjoy the shit out of watching Stevie win and Freddie and Brandon, but yeah, I would say personal satisfaction was probably a little better, maybe not. I don't know, watching, in all honesty, him win the Outlaw show was probably the best thing I ever seen, and until a couple weeks later he passed Larson. I have so much respect for him. That was just as good. So
aren't you, even when Stevie was in the car, so not counting when your kids are in, more nervous so than when you were driving?
I can honestly say that I enjoyed having Stevie run my car because I felt he was in total control, just like you would with Lance.
Yeah.
And then he had already learned everything, but
I'm nervous though, and I'm sure you were, because every time Stevie drove that car, you guys had a chance to win, and that's what I'm nervous about, is
letting them down.
Yeah, letting them down. Someone's coming to drive your car, and we know how hard it is to drive and do the right things, because we've done it, not done the right things always, but drive and win a race, and if you're running up front, you don't want to let the guy down for something that you overlooked or should have been done.
Right, yeah, for sure. And as far as for me having Stevie drive, I was totally comfortable. But it's the smartest thing I ever did in racing, because it helped me sustain all my sponsors through the change from where I went to where Freddie got good enough for the people to stick with us. But it also, he drives more like Stevie than he does me, which I feel is a total plus. So it was all good with that. But
he was a good teacher.
Yeah, very good, very good. And it's not that he doesn't have respect for me when I would say something to him, but just talking to just another guy, Steve.
Different with fathers.
And truthfully, Stevie was just a better driver than I was. So
what is he doing today?
He's got his own business, doing bolts and stuff.
Yeah, I seen that, but nothing else. He's not
No
doing racing
driving. No. He's so busy.
He's got a good business.
Yeah.
And he's out what state?
Oklahoma. Yeah, like Donnie said, you get a guy fly all the way in from Oklahoma to drive your race car.
Yeah, you can't.
You better step up to the plate and deliver. The first time he drove for me, he got out of the car after warm-ups, and I said, "Stevie, how's the motor feel?" He said, "Oh, it feels good." I said, "Good, it's the only one we got." But it was a really good experience, and
Now,
just
Dad
like
still lives here, don't he?
what's that? Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Still in New Oxford, yep. That was all good.
Oh, yeah.
This is for Fred. Having watched you throughout your whole career, I would crown you the master of restarts. If you weren't leading already on restarts, you probably have the record for passing cars. You always got to be swerved too. Talk about that technique.
Well, that's something in today's racing is the most important thing there is, because if you aren't good on restarts, you will be in trouble, because our cars are so even now, however you want to say, that you have to be good on restarts. But like, if you're racing locally, and I try and teach Freddie, you have to anticipate what the guy's going to do. And then if he really knows you, you gotta know he knows you know what you gotta do, and then you gotta go one more step past that. And like Freddie pulled off a great restart at the Outlaw show, but it all started because, you know, you come around for a restart, you can be led around or you can be the leader. And if you let the guy push you around, that'll be forever. That don't mean you cheat, you don't run into him, but you set the tone the way the thing's gonna go. Yeah, it's one thing. I wasn't as good as some of the guys that drive, but I was the best restarter, I would say for sure.
And especially, and most of the guys here aren't gonna, you know, remember that, but, you know, back in the day before they had the cone, the restarts were a little wild, and you were definitely the best there, because you could really make some time up. You know, it did matter. I mean, when the leader went, it was open game, or even a little before the leader went. And when you started back in the pack, it got pretty exciting, and used to start going down the backstretch, I think, 1 and 3,
we would start off at 2 sometimes at Grove.
Right.
Yeah, one time at the Grove, I started 12th in an Outlaw show, and I spiffed by the flag man, and the yellow come out 1 lap later, and I was just trying to blend in so they wouldn't, you know, because I figured they'd get me for cheap. And we ended up winning that night, but the whole thing is restarting, and you got to get good at it, got to anticipate, have a game plan, and be willing to change it. But there's a lot to be said for restarts as a driver, big time.
Any other questions? Yes.
Maybe I missed it, but like an adjustable W link, like I haven't heard you guys really talk about that for setup.
We sell them. He's asking about an adjustable W-link. They have the ones out now that have like 3 holes. You know, has one in the center, the normal one, and one above. You can lower it. On the bottom, you can raise it. We haven't run them at all on our own car. We just run a normal one in the center. You know, I think there's probably a time for it. You know, especially if you're. I haven't tested with one, so you know, don't know besides whatever you think it might do. You know, if it's pointing down, you think it'd make the car roll in the right rear, you know, a little bit more or something. So probably would be a quickie change you could make if you don't have time to change something, you know, or on a red flag or something like that. But I actually haven't experimented with them.
I didn't know if it was a pretty significant adjustment or if it was.
I don't know. Have you guys?
I don't know. Truthfully, it locates the rear in our car, and I mean, if you're smart enough to figure out that the roll center is over here and all that, I never was smart enough to do that. We've run it in the center, if however many, with the exception of 1 or 2. I just think it's another adjustment, and I'm sure you guys might do it with the non-wing stuff.
Yeah, but we got away from it. We leave it alone now.
I just I think you're better off with other adjustments.
Yeah, looking at other places.
Other areas.
Okay. That's what I feel.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
On tires, air or nitrogen, any difference?
Wait, you know, I tried nitrogen years ago, and it was kind of expensive, you know, if you mount a bunch of tires up and stuff, and we've just been on regular air, you know, probably the last 10 years or something, and
maybe if you ran a division where no bleeders were legal, you know what I mean? Maybe then it would make a difference. We've always just run air, and you know, but we've always been allowed to run bleeders.
Anyone else?
Are those electronic bleeders the way to go now, or what's your opinions on those?
He's asking about the electronic bleeders, if they're the way to go. I still run the old style ones. I've actually never messed with them.
We're the same way. It's probably easier to set them, and you don't have to mess with keeping on top of the regular old bleeders, but they're a lot cheaper, the ones we run, and never fall out of races or anything, so.
The fancy electronic ones, I think when the tire's hot, it's showing one pressure, and it bleeds down, and as it cools off under the yellow, I think them guys get below pressure. You know what I mean? Because when they first come out, I Jason Sides' car, they had one sitting in the sun, and just the sun would make it start to piss some air away. I don't know, and I don't know, again, I'm not smart enough, if the car's really pumping on that right rear through the corners, if it displaces enough area, that it don't just squeeze that out of them bleeders. Because a lot of them guys on restarts are halfway wounded sometimes, and now they got delays in them, right, and restrictors, so they don't bleed off. I mean, a lot of guys have a lot of success with them too. You know, like you said, you just push the number in you want and you're there, but, I mean, I don't know. We just run the regular ones. That's all we run.
You run them on the wheels or on the tube?
We've ran them both, but now we run them in the wheels. Didn't really see much difference.
Never had a problem with them not letting
No, we're always right there.
Anyone else?
What am I reading that the DOT is still starting to crack down you guys with tractor trailers? You gotta have CDL, you gotta have your physical card,
I do.
and anything over 26,000 pounds or something, you gotta,
I think that is the case. I don't know. I mean, I know for sure they got Hodenshields guys in the parking lot at Giant while he was sleeping.
yeah, I
They
read
went in
that
and,
last.
they went in and busted on him in the parking lot.
You gotta run a logbook.
We do, but I think we could just have a trip book
Okay.
because we're only within 120 miles or whatever, 150
Yeah,
air
I'm just saying
miles.
if you go to Knoxville this year and,
Oh yeah, we definitely do that. You know, my tractor doesn't have an electronic log,
right,
but I think I get 8 days a month that we can travel outside of our area.
okay.
So we do. Yeah, but the bottom line is, whether you're legal or not, they can find something on you.
Yeah, I see they were starting to really crack down these old.
It seems like it. I know it's worse in some areas.
Yes, it's okay.
Yes.
Is there some tracks that are harder on your equipment than others?
But, I mean, to me, the wetter and heavier the track is, you know, it's certainly harder on the motor, on the rear, you know, on the drive line than a smooth, slick track isn't, you know, you could run, to me, is a lot easier on everything. Otherwise, you know, nowadays, it's probably not that much difference. You know, the only thing, like Fred said, you know, they have a 12 motor, they can run 25 races, so, you know, I'm sure if you were just running at Lincoln, I think you could probably run a motor longer there than you could run it at Williams, you know, than you could run it at Williams Grove and be competitive, but I don't know, what do you guys
Yeah,
think?
that's whatchamacallit. To me, truthfully, other than the fact that the 12 head, we can be competitive. Stevie won an outlaw race with the motor that motor's 80 or so down from a regular motor, but it really works good at that track. Other than that, it doesn't cost me personally no more money to go to Williams Grove. You know, but Donnie's program's a little different. We run our motors, so we go the 10 to 15 shows, depending on everything's playing out. And also, you gotta look if the outlaws are coming in and that's your Sunday motor, you gotta maybe short cycle it once or twice to make sure you're ready for when them guys get here. But I don't know, if the track's got rocks in it and is hard on the wings and the bodies, big curbs, that just destroys the stuff, and that costs you more money.
Anyone else? All right, we're gonna start with Dave from Willwood here. Dave, do you want to say anything before I pop a bunch of questions at you, or? All right, good.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Personally, of all the people that I've associated with in racing, this guy is very knowledgeable and has the answer. And like Donnie said earlier, because he's been there and done that,
Right.
you're not going to stumble him up. So if you have a problem with anything with brake related, he'd be the guy.
I know everyone always has trouble. We do this every year, but I like to do it, and I had a couple of people ask me in the store today already about it. So about bleeding brakes, and Dave has a real easy way of doing it. So you want to tell them that first, Dave? Here, you can use the mic. Yeah. Whatever. Don't care. Only
Do I
$30.
need the mic? Can you all hear me? Yes? You hear me without it? So I speak louder. Otherwise we'll start karaoke. So I just talk about bleeding, even though it sounds something that's just so stupid and silly, and everybody in here's done it a long time racing. But I do get asked this probably more question than anything else. And of course, I do everything from sprint cars to pavement late models to the modified. So I deal with all facets of racing. But you know, the bleeding system is really simple, and it can save you a lot of aggravation and money. So I'm just going to start off with, I think, probably the most traditional way guys did it was it probably weren't even using a bleed bottle. So they're probably just, you know, pumping the pedal, cracking a bleeder, and hoping that the air's out, or if it quits making a spew sound or whatever, and they call it good and move on to the next one. You know, it's like setup stuff. It's probably, you know, 9 times out of 10, it's fine, but truly, I mean, the right way to do it is with a bleed bottle. And you can even do it by yourself, because even myself, I have to do it by myself quite often. The one, you should have a bleed bottle. And it's all start if you had a whole brand new system, new master cylinder, fresh lines, whole 9 yards.
Why should you have a bleed bottle? I know you explained it to me once, but...
Okay, you're getting ahead.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just
Well,
kidding. No, go
ahead.
ahead. The bleed bottle, what it does for you is when you put it on the nipple and you open it up, and there's a hose that goes into the bottom, you have just a little bit of fluid in there. So basically, as you're bleeding the brake, you physically see the air, so there's not a guess if there's air in the caliper or not. So, and the other one too is you can tell that it's clean and not nasty, you know, after the fact, after it's been used. So that's the biggest thing.
And it won't suck air back in,
It won't
right?
suck air back
Because
in.
it's in fluid. The hose that's on your bleeder is in brake fluid. So till the point of where you get it closed or whatever, it can't suck air back in after you bleed it out.
Yes. So if you have all new stuff, I mean, the first thing is, you know, before I put the lines even on the back of the master cylinder, fluid in the reservoir, of course. And I'm gonna, you know, nowadays, the way the cars are, you can pull that quarter side panel off, and most people have their high speeds and stuff. And you can just reach in there, and you can put a rag or a pan under the back of the master, and push the pedal down while there's fluid in the reservoir, but put your finger over the back of the master cylinder, the discharge port. So whether if you're running a banjo type fitting or a T, but make sure you close that off before you release the pedal, and that draws the fluid in the master. Take your finger off, do that again. As soon as you get like a couple squirts of solid fluid out, and you hold your finger when you release it, hook your lines up, and then the master cylinder is bled. You know, usually you get away without doing that, but I've seen it and it's even caught me out, because I, of all people, tried to shortcut. And at one time, it'll get you and you'll try to bleed the brakes and you won't get any pedal, and it's because the master cylinder basically has got a big air bubble in there. So after you've done that, the left front, doesn't matter what caliper you're running, you're always going to start with the furthest one away. And I always just roll the caliper around so a nipple's pointing straight up. Doesn't have to be above the master, none of that stuff. Just get it clean so it's straight up in the air, you know, because the air is going to want to go to the top. Put the bleed bottle on the outside, open it, don't worry about nothing in the pedal. So that's the beauty about the bottle again, is when you open it, you can go back to the car by yourself, reach to the side panel, push the pedal down to the motor plate, all the way back. You just keep doing that, never close the bleeder, just watch that bottle, watch the hose. As soon as you see there's no more air, hold the pedal down. So I made a bar, basically, that wedges between the seat and the pedal, so now I can just put it in there, walk to the left front, close it, move on to the next one. And I do that whole process until I get to the rear end. Then when it's all said and done, I give it a couple pumps and it's good. During this whole process, if you've got, I mean, I don't know, on the master cylinders, there's been, the early versions had caps that didn't have like a rubber bellow in them. You know, all the new stuff now has like this bellow that's inside of them. Okay? I don't know how many guys got them, I'm sure the majority do now. But it's really imperative if you have one like this, the cap has to be relieved off the reservoir. Okay? Not completely off, but just back it off. Because if it doesn't, as you're pumping, it wants to suck this diaphragm down there, and then it'll get to a point, I mean, the brakes won't work. So you have to ensure the reservoir cap is off when you're doing the bleeding at any time. And part of your maintenance is, you know, in my opinion, you should be doing the rear end board after every race at least. You know, I think it's just easy, again, by yourself. You want to get that old fluid out of there. Again, no matter what system you're running, the fluid is your culprit. Usually it's going to get you, A, from boiling, It's because it gets hot, it breaks down, the pedal becomes mushy. So it's just cheap insurance maintenance just to get that old crap out and get some new stuff in. And then if you're using one of these things, then you should always ensure the fluid levels all the way top, and you push the diaphragm all the way back in each time and put it on. Now the whole purpose of this is that one, the old cylinders used to bleed fluid out, get all over your uniform, make a mess, put a rag on there, whatever. This doesn't do that. The other thing it does is it keeps moisture out of them, which is like every OEM car has a diaphragm. That's its biggest reason, is washing. It just helps, not get the fluids contaminated as quickly because no moisture gets in there. So it's got its own separate air system. So that's really the big thing about bleeding.
Any questions on that, on the bleeding the brakes?
What do you think about the pump valve?
I'm against all that stuff. I'm not, from years ago, I've been through that whole deal. I've had the deal that sucks out, the pressurizing, the pumping, and you just can't be, this way here, I can tell you that every major form of racing, it's what they call purge bleeding. This is how it's done. It's just the most reliable way. You're not inducing anything into the system. It's just natural. And truly, if you really want to do it the 110% way, but it's time consuming and it can make a mess, especially if the master's above the caliper. Honestly, just gravity bleeding is one of the best ways, but it's just you gotta have a lot of patience. It makes a mess. So, all these other tools, they can say what they want about, pressure. I think it's just, it's unnecessary. The bleed bottle is the best investment you can make. 1 second, sorry. Yes, sir.
So you've got everything right, you've led the system, you have all the air out. How much free travel should you have from the time you touch the brake until the brakes apply?
All of it depends on master cylinder size. So I'll tell you this, is that if you got any size master cylinder, and if you went in there and hit the brake pedal, it should be usually around 100 thousandths of free play, like slop you'll feel. And that's just basically the push rod engaging into the master cylinder, okay? So the smaller the master cylinder, you're definitely going to get more pedal travel because it's a smaller bore. A bigger master will take less movement. But the disadvantage of that, like a sprint car is a good example. So most guys will run the pedal 5.5 inches off the motor plate. So if you have a 1-inch master cylinder now, and the pedal goes down, let's just say if everything's right, 1 inch. Maybe a little over 1 inch, okay? You were to just go to a 7/8 from that, it's going to go down probably closer to 2 inches. Because it's a smaller cylinder, you're going to get more line pressure, less leg effort, but you're going to have more pedal movement, okay? So, that's all just sitting still there, everything in the perfect world. That's not on the racetrack. That's sitting there and ensuring that, the brackets are all straight, the pads are fresh, there's no taper, so nothing that's going to induce any kind of deflection in the system. One minute here, what gentleman here?
Yeah, you touched on a little bit there, gravity bleeding, you're starting with a fresh system, no fluid in it yet, does gravity bleeding give you a leg up to get started?
He's asking about gravity bleed on a new system. I'm still going to bleed the master cylinder like I expressed. There's no advantage to doing it. Like I said, it works very well as long as the master's above. But it just takes time. You put pans under there, there are bottles on each one. It's much more time consuming. And quite honestly, most racers, including myself, aren't patient enough for that. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
How often do you change the fluid, or at least bleed the old fluid out of the caliper?
Oh yeah, so that's what I mentioned earlier. If it's me, it is me. I'm going to do at least the rear inboard every time I race a car. That's the one that gets the most work. And you can always, when you bleed the fluid, you're going to see it's always going to come out black and nasty. And it does two things. One, you can get fresh fluid into the caliper, but you're also inducing, you're helping circulate the stuff, the fluid, through the whole system. So, because when fluid does go, everybody wants to sometimes think, oh, my brake pedal got soft, oh, I boiled the fluid. Boiling the fluid, quite honestly, with about any good fluid nowadays, it's impossible. It's a thing of the past. It doesn't happen anymore. What happens is it breaks down and it loses its compressibility. So it just becomes soft. It's it loses, a good brake fluid, you can feel it. It does change the pedal feel because mainly it's how it compresses.
When I started doing this, we had let's a 15/16 master cylinder. We had number 3/16 brake line, steel brake line. We put a flex line at the end. Now we have some guys that say number 3 brake line, some guys say number 2 brake line. What's the advantages?
There's no difference. I mean, I can tell you from my own stuff, I run 3/16 hard line only because it's mainly old school, but I've ran -3, I've ran -2, I've had numerous other types of race cars. Pavement late model is a good example, -3 to 2, and there's no difference. Now, I'll say this, people that are old enough, when those things weren't around, they used to be -4. Now, if you went to that, now that's a big change. So 3 to 2 nowadays, and you know, it's like going to plumbing a car in soft lines. You know, people ask me, there's no issue with that stuff. I think, you know, good quality line now, as long as it's a swedged ends. I mean, that stuff is really good. I mean, there's no issue with it. So, but you'd be hard pressed to have somebody, you change a line -3 to 2. If you didn't tell them, come in, oh my God, what'd you do? I mean, it ain't gonna happen.
So then, what size master cylinder should you buy?
That's all based on pedal ratio, and that's another really good question for sprint cars in general, because I definitely run into this one a lot. So out there in the world, I mean, J&J, I'll use that for an example. So J&J, I mean, he's always had an 8-to-1 ratio, which is really out there. So I'll run into guys that have ran, it could be a Maxim, Triple X, whatever it may be. Sheldon Hobshaw is a good example. Last year he jumped into that J&J, went to Ocala. I mean, he was damn near spinning out every lap, just couldn't control it. The pedal ratio on those, because it's less leg effort, right? It's got a high ratio, so it doesn't take a lot of effort. The brake pressure is way up there. So on those cars, 1 inch was good. You ran a 7/8, I mean, you're gonna get a lot of travel, but it was like power brakes. So guys really struggled with it. Maxim, Triple X, where they're down to the 6-to-1 ratios, right? You've got a 1-inch master in those, and the pedals rock hard. You've got to push harder to make it stop. But that's why even now we did a 15/16, because some guys, if you went to a 7/8, it was too much. The 1 inch, they didn't like it, so we started doing a 15/16 to split that. But in my opinion, and I tell a lot of guys, and the majority of them have converted, I mean, 7-to-1 is the ideal ratio. So, I mean, there's guys that make the pedal, but if 7-to-1 pedal ratio is the ideal pedal ratio with a 1-inch master. But, everybody, again, is like whatever brake system you're running. I mean, everybody's got a little different flavor and different way of doing it. But a standard race car today, if it's off the shelf, still the 1-inch is probably the most standard setup.
Can you tell them how to check their brake pedal just in case they
The
want
ratio.
to? The
Yeah.
ratio.
So the ratio is a really easy one, is if you were to take where it bolts to the pivot of the chassis, from the center of that, and I just go down to the bottom of the pedal, it's easier. So let's go to the very bottom, and let's just say that that's 14 inches. And you go from the center of the pivot up to the center where it would hook to the master, and say that's 2 inches, 2 into 14, that's 7-to-1. That's just a number, so you just take the big number and divide it by the small, that's going to tell you the ratio. In Knoxville this year, an example was a guy come over and he said, man, he said, I got 2 cars, he said, same brake systems, but this one works better, this one doesn't work as well. Went over and looked at it, and what it was is he had one car that had a standard, at that time it was a Triple X, had a standard Triple X pedal, and then he went and bought a brake pedal that was from All-Star. Well, it was a completely different ratio. So the whole pedal feels different. That was his whole issue. Went over, bought another pedal like the other one, and it fixed his problem. So you really have to be careful. Even if you have a car, you're going to go to a different pedal, a titanium pedal. If you're used to something and you like it, you really need to ensure that you stick with that same one across the board, because it can get you in trouble. Then you'll start blaming everything else, and it's really not a problem of any of the system, no matter what brake you're running.
Isn't your master cylinder sizing depending on how many calipers in the piston area and all that?
Not really. No, I mean, again, you can run, a good example is ultralight, right? I mean, about every ultralight car runs 3 brakes, and they're pretty much on a 7/8. I mean, you get to a point, it would make a difference, but I've got guys that run inboards and left fronts only, went to an outboard, and they're on 1 inch, and they run the same one. The guys with 7/8. I mean, it really is, it's minute. Because the piston size and the volume is what dictates it. And in a sprint car, it's pretty cut and dry what the volumes are, so you're really not getting anything out there in left field. Anybody else on that stuff? Yes,
Is it
sir.
good practice to rebuild calipers every year, or is it if it ain't broke, don't fix it sort of thing?
I can honestly say, as much as I hate to say it, that, you know, I don't mess with the stuff. You know, it's just, if you take care of your stuff, I mean, it's really not an issue. You can tell by looking at the pistons. Now, I will say this, where I run into some issues, are guys that run up on the northeast, and some of them tracks that run like calcium chloride on their stuff, and that can be a problem, because that stuff is really hard on things. So, but if you look at your pistons, you don't see big knocks in them. And also keep in mind that piston and where the seal is, you know, that seal's a quarter of an inch back inside there. So it's really hard to hurt those things, honestly. Yeah. Any other questions on that stuff? What?
I know on the newer calibers on your stuff, there's some guys, you know how they did that T thing for a crossover line? Looking at someone.
Yeah, I am actually the question.
So that's not really necessary.
Here, the crossover, so it was an old school thing where, you know, it used to be you put the T, feed both sides of the calipers, thinking it's equalized. I mean, that caliper it doesn't matter whose caliper, again, it doesn't know. It's all internal. I mean, pressure is pressure, fluid's fluid. But to me, it's just another thing to get tore off, and you're just opening another potential issue. So I only looked at a friend of mine because we had a good go around about this.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So, but no, it's just, you put it on, is it going to hurt anything? No, but to me, why have something on there that's going to potentially give you more issues? It's unnecessary.
How about residual valve? Is that necessary anymore, or?
Residual valves are almost a thing of the past, quite honestly, too. I mean, it used to be the norm. I think it's because technology and master cylinders isn't where it is now. The calipers have got better. It's just, to me, the residual valve, even though we make them and they're still, I mean, you don't see them as widely used. Some guys still swear by them, and that's great, but they really have the capability of creating more issues and helping you, because if they fail in the worst position and they lock the brakes down. So, again, it's preference. I mean, if a guy wants them, I mean, you know, I know a lot of guys are successful that run them. I mean, but I don't think they're absolutely necessary in this day.
Dave,
Yes,
do you
sir.
think as the brake pads wear, you should put spacers in there? Or you think it,
No, and that's a good question. I get that asked a lot too. I don't like spacers, because here's the thing, you put a spacer in there, so the caliper is moving now, pistons are moving, but you're putting another potential area in there to get cocked, to get things to hang up, and you're not gaining nothing. What happens is when the pad wears out, you're not really losing pedal feel because of the pad thickness, you're losing it because as things get warm and hot, doesn't matter whose pad again it is, I mean, they get soft, and you start losing some of their compression. And that's what you're feeling. That's why you can, you know, when you put a fresh set of pads there, man, the pedal just feels great. As soon as you start running, I mean, it's just how it is. The pad material starts getting a little bit soft, and it's trying to compress. So I don't like anything that's a spacer. You know, it's like pads. You don't see it very much anymore. But if a pad starts tapering, you know, I've seen guys take them out and want to turn them around. I mean, I think it's the worst thing to do, because it's like a tire, right? Everybody used to turn tires around.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
Those things get stretching and growing different directions, like turning the torsion bar around. The pads gets heat, it gets going this direction. Everything's getting going in one direction, you start turning it around. But now you're asking it to do something else, trying to square it back up. So you just, you know, if they get to that point, I mean, it's a consumable, unfortunately. So, you know, you can buy pads that'll last a long time. They probably won't work as good, but it's like having a, you know, soft tire and a hard tire. So if you want to stop, I mean, usually you have a little better brake pad.
What about like on the weekly service, like, because I noticed on ours that it gets pretty late.
Yeah.
And just take them up and break them like this.
Yeah, that's a
Take them
good,
with some meat grip or
well, that's a good question, because like even myself, I mean, I used to get yelled at, but I'm rubbing around in the concrete. I just keep a cinder block. And the same, that's part of my weekly maintenance after every night or every event. take the pads out, and if I'm gonna use them again, I just deglaze them and put them back in. Just knock that shine off, and it enhances their life.
That's what I've been doing, I just wanted to.
Yeah, so like you want to use sandpaper, but I mean, honestly, a cinder block, cement block works great. Yeah, for the floor, if your wife doesn't get mad or
Loading versus a clamp inboard.
yeah, that's a topic, but it almost pretty much sorted itself out. So I'll say this, that a 305,
I missed this question.
sorry, yeah, I should have mentioned it. So he was asking a question about a true floating inboard clamp system, verting, as opposed to one that's just a clamp down. So I'm just gonna clear up. So the floating one, like Winners, DMI, the one that comes on your rim when you buy it, that just goes on the spline, that's not floating. Okay, first of all, yeah, it floats on the spline, but that's not a floating brake rotor. Okay, so that's just a normal mount nowadays. A floating system is like what we have. I mean, Ultralight builds one, DMI builds one, and that's made so that brakes get hot. Things can grow and move, so it saves the rotor doesn't warp. I mean, you don't get that knock back in the pedal. It just enhances the life and increases your pedal feel and the rotor life. So a 305, for instance, I mean, notoriously, I mean, you're not going to be killing the brakes on those things. Just run them, to me, the simplest thing you can. So like a standard, floater, a standard plate like that comes from Winners, that's sufficient. But anything you're going to run potentially where you're going to be using the brakes, and it could get hot, it could be glowing at any point in time. Doesn't matter which one. You want to float. I mean, because again, it will help the pedal feel, right? That you won't get that knockback. You will, especially on long racetracks, have to go down there and pump the brake pedal. It takes a lot of that out of the equation. Anything else? What else do you have there?
Well, you guys pretty much got them all. The only thing I had here, on the front rotor, if you're running an aluminum one, so the pad always was the purple pad, and then, now we've had for the last few years the Q pad. Is there a difference between them? Which one should they be using, or what's the characteristics between them?
So the purple pad was like, it's been around forever. I think as people got used to running it, they're happy with it. It's a great pad. The Q was developed, and it was more geared towards, honestly, the wing guys, but even the non-wing guys, it's a longer wearing pad. It's easier on the aluminum. There's no real stopping power between the two. You'll have guys that say, oh, the purple one is different. I can guarantee I could paint the one purple, take one, and again, change it, and you would not know the difference, because by dyno testing, the material, there's no difference. The Q is just gonna be replacing the purple. And a lot of it becomes, quite honestly, nowadays, is pad materials and EPA and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they force you to start looking to change things. And it's just kind of been an evolution. We knew we were going to change the pad for aluminum, so we tried to take it to the next step. And honestly, it was geared towards the wing guys, because a lot of times it's a compromise of getting too much brake, not enough brake. This was a happy medium. But
Well, I've heard different things. People say we run 305.
Yep.
And they say the purple pad with the aluminum rotor because the brake is less aggressive.
Less aggressive?
Is that true?
No.
False, or
That's what I'm just saying. I mean, there's no difference now.
you still run a steel rotor with the purple pad on?
No, you can't do that. No, you said aluminum, I thought. Aluminum.
No. I was told that we should run aluminum rotor with the purple pad because it's less aggressive.
Then
It has less braking power.
Then
Yeah, that would
Right.
That would be,
Like for-
it's not aggressive or not,
for a green
it's how much
driver,
stopping
that
power.
would be-
Again, here's the thing about aluminum. I mean, when people ask me, what's the best brake? Well, there is no answer that fits everybody. To me, it's like the aluminum left front. If it works fine for you because it's just cost effective, right, and you get away with it, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. The steel rotor, we've had this conversation, it's becoming a little bit of a new trend thing now, going to a steel left front, because you definitely have combinations of brake pads to help tune your race car. So that's kind of an evolution that's starting to happen now. So, with the aluminum, you really got, quite honestly, the one pad. There is no difference. Titanium's the same issue. You don't have really no really controllable deals there. So steel's becoming more of a tuning tool. Even on the outlaw side, a couple guys have gone that direction because.
Oh, they
now-
have
Yeah.
the regular steel or the SA?
Barry Jackson's a good example. Their carbon steel rotor.
Okay.
So they have different combinations of brake pads to help tune them.
Is it the same circumference as the aluminum one is?
Yeah, 11-inch diameter. Yeah, it's like you have with their 11-inch solid steel rotor.
Okay.
So again, it's just all, a lot of it is preference, you know. So, oh, sorry.
Oh, just talking about like the diameter of the rotors and stuff, like I run the small rotor on the left front just for clearance on the wheels so the caliper's not running, but like for the inboard, you know, you run an 8-10 thick, or some guys I see running just a, you know, solid thin rotor. Does that make a huge difference on?
Well, so you're running a small left front, when you run the Sanders wheels?
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much, that's a kind of an oddity. Most guys don't run a small left front rotor. And honestly there, it's,
Not a big deal.
well, it does make a difference. So it's like, it's just it's physics, right? I mean, the diameter's torque, so
It's a
you're gonna
lever.
get, it makes more difference than you think. So that's the left front, but you're kind of locked in there because of a Sanders wheel. The inboard rear, you're talking about a plate rotor, like a plate steel rotor?
Yeah, I've seen some of those. I
Well-
run 8-10 wide, but.
Well, an 810 cast iron now, I mean, to me, that's a great rotor. Now, a plate steel rotor is pretty much a thing in the past. I would never recommend a plate steel rotor on the back of anything, because the problem with it is it may work fine going out there when it's really cold, you come off the track, you don't get the trailer, but it starts getting any kind of heat in it, I mean, they just give up, they quit, they just can't recover. So it's just not, you know, if you're talking steel.
Yeah, I think titanium fits some of them are.
Yeah, but titanium is, and I'll touch base on that only because, I mean, we're involved in that, and it's nothing new. Anybody, again, that's been around, I mean, Ben Cook was the first guy that ever did titanium rotors, you know, and they did it at the time was because there was no options for weight. People were on, and they still are to a certain point, I think they get a little bit carried away on these big weight kicks. But, you know, titanium really is not a good material. I mean, if it was so great, I mean, it'd be used in other forms of racing. It's just not a good material, and it's expensive. So, you know, truly to this day, if somebody wants the best brake, they're gonna run cast iron. Bended cast iron. I still refer to it as the Raymer brake. You know, lots of guys that win lots of races on that thing across the country, but it truly is the best brake, and, you know, that's why we did this stainless, we call it stainless, but SA series. We did that because we wanted to find that in between of weight savings and some characteristics of the cast iron stopping power. So that's why we developed that one. So a guy could save some weight, still have some good stopping power.
So now with that small left front rotor, is there another material that give me a little better braking on that, like a steel or something like that compared to aluminum?
If you think you need more left front there, absolutely. Yeah, you can put if you can find, I mean, 10-inch steel, they're kind of hard to find. Because like even a midget's about the only thing quite out there with a 10-inch rotor. So, you know, we used to even make a steel, we even quit doing it because it's just almost a thing of the past. Yeah.
Is your 10.5-inch stainless, that would clear them wheels probably
Yeah,
too, right?
It's a vented rotor. It's on by the left front.
Yeah, that one. Your left front stainless rotor. He had
Oh,
trouble
no,
clearing
yeah,
the wheels. That would probably, that would,
TP320.
yeah, that would
Oh, yeah.
probably clear, I mean, it's more expensive, but
Yeah,
that
the
would probably
TP320.
clear the wheels.
And it has
That
more
11
stopping
inch
power.
doesn't, right?
Yes, and it has more stopping power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, on the left front, if a guy's looking for more brake, do you think that probably stops less than the steel or not, or probably the same, or more?
No,
on the left front.
The steel's still going to be your most stopping power.
Is it?
If you
Okay.
truly want to put the most aggressive pad in it, it's going to have the most stopping power. But with its pad options, you can get to where it's aluminum feel. If it's you know, there's a lot more. I mean, you want more left front to pull it. You want less. You just have tunability. So, for instance, you look at the cars that we deal with. It's not a sprint car, but a Silver Crown, and we run the steel front rotor, a little single caliper. I mean, it's a big reason that we run different pads there. So I definitely run a different pad in the right front because we run 2 front brakes. But in the straightaway, if it's got too much brake and it induces a big push going in the corner, we run a little bit lighter, different pad over there. So we still got the brake, but it helps the car pull, but we don't, induce a push in the car. But it's got better options over there.
Any other questions on the brakes?
I was gonna ask, oh, sorry, somebody had something? Oh, too, and you guys have seen it, and so the one thing we did change this year, and a lot of it, the things that we do, and I'm very, more so the open wheel stuff, is I do all the development, and I work with a lot of teams and builders, and everything we do, we pretty much test for at least a year before we introduce them. So like the rear caliper we did, you know, it was probably the single biggest thing we did. Everybody just ran it. It's a noticeable change. That's why we went to a bigger bore caliper in the back, because, you know, guys were saying they felt they wanted some more brake. It was an easy one to do. So that's why we built this new caliper. Basically gives you almost 15% more stopping power and doesn't really change anything. That's kind of was our only real change we did this year. And then with our Type 3 hard anodized, which, so if some guys still had some of that nickel stuff, I mean, the nickel, when we did it, was really our only option to have a caliper that enhanced life and was really good with heat. When Bill Wood, it's a completely privately owned company, put in his own hard anodized facility in California, Type 3 hard anodized. I mean, that's when we started doing everything hardcore racing parts were Type 3 mil-spec hard anodized. So one, it enables us to cut some costs, but also ensure the quality, because now we don't farm anything out. Everything is done completely in-house. So that was the biggest reason for that change. Is there any complaints or anything from anybody that maybe had our stuff or wanted to yell at me about anything?
They do stand behind their stuff. That's one thing, you know, there's not a lot of racing companies, unfortunately, that do, but he tells me all the time, if you have someone that's unhappy or something, and, you know, he's also available for questions. I mean, he stands behind his product 100%.
And we did have a couple issues, our stainless ones, I mean, and it was far and few between. We had a batch of pads get out there that, in the right circumstances, when there's a new rotor, a new pad, I mean, you'd have thought that you put the rotor in a lathe. It looked like you put a tool to it. And, I mean, it was very sporadic, but, you know, anybody that ever got a hold of wherever they got it from, we replaced them, no questions asked. But if there's ever an issue in regards to our product, you know, whoever you deal with, hopefully it's Johnny, I mean, he knows he can get with me, and we're always going to stand behind our stuff. It doesn't, you know, doesn't matter what it is.
Any other questions for Dave? Anyone have any other questions for myself or Fred or Freddie or?
I do have one. We didn't really talk on. I hear people say about believing power steering in a sprint car from weekly maintenance. Necessary, unnecessary?
I don't do it as a weekly maintenance. If we worked on if we work on something on the power steering, you know, change a pump or on our car's a wing cylinder or something that it was open. When we start the car, I'll generally take the drag link off, you know, turn the steering wheel back and forth, run the wing cylinder front and back, is what we do. I don't know, do you guys, you don't do anything weekly, right?
Yeah, weekly we check fluid.
Butch Green was telling us on the 305, said a lot of times we don't run back-to-back weeks. If a week goes by where you don't run, before you go out, is to take it off, and 10 times the left, 10 to the right.
I never heard that.
I've never had a problem with it. I mean, it doesn't cost nothing to do it. They do a great job up there, so.
I don't do it all the time, I just want to.
Yeah.
Necessary frame not, so.
There's one in the back, yeah.
Just go with the wheel space that we talked about this morning. We're talking about, 18 inches, obviously that's off of the frame, not off of the torsion arm.
Yeah.
Okay.
The measurement was off the frame, because that's what most guys go by, so that's what we were giving you.
Just squaring the rear end, is it, like, I know when some cars you can square the rear end and it's bang on, front to back to the motor plate and side to side. Some cars, which is more important to have the rear axle parallel to the motor plate and the torque ball free, or to have it dead center in the car?
I know how you guys probably have an easier, I mean, I go by, I don't worry about where it is side to side. I don't know how do you guys do it?
I check off the motor plate and get the 38 5/8 and.
On the right
decide-
side is where we start.
Yeah, and then the side to side, if that right's measurement's right, and then the left side to side's right, and then say if it's long or short by a 16th, I don't really worry about that if the torque ball is free. It's like, as long as it's a T in there.
Yeah, when I would run J&Js, they always had a tendency to be a little long on the left side. You can't pull it around to where you want it. It's going to be where it's going to be. You know what I mean? We do our right side and go from there, and you know, we do check side to side, but you can't force the car. It's going to be where it's going to be. You know what I mean?
Any other questions? All right, I want to thank the speakers, Dave and Fred and Freddie. Dave's been here the last bunch of years, and he said Freddie did a great job. Thought it was the best class. So thank them guys. Thank you guys for coming. Store's open. I'll be over there if you guys need anything.